Hello, welcome to my channel, Save Infinity. In this video, I just wanted to briefly kind of, discuss the whole, rendering of our reality and how it's, kind of like a dream or video game in that sense, thinking to things of like the observer effect with the double split experiment, or, things that like Dolores Cannon and such, have spoken about. And so, like the idea of, every scene or what have you like that is kind of like rendered from, an infinite field that kind of, collapses into reality as you observe it. Similar to the idea of like how Dolores Cannon would speak about things like buildings and stuff like that, like the inside of the building is generated as you like, walk into it or observe it, or, like if you're driving to a building, it's like it doesn't exist until you have that intent and start driving there towards it. And generally at the moment things are like rendered or generated from a more like 3D linear logical type human perspective of ways of that we're used to kind of experiencing reality, to make it have this sort of cohesive linear feeling that we tend to used to experiencing, so we don't get confused or things like that. But there actually are like infinite possibilities and like outcomes and stuff that really can be rendered and can be like chopped and changed and what have you, kind of like the idea of like in the Matrix and like bending the spoon and what have you. And so playing around with such ideas and kind of practicing your ability to create or render or generate scenes that are a little more magical in that sense is easier to do when you're trying to do it in like a private space or what have you, when there aren't other people around, because we are also co-creating together. So if there's other people around expecting a scene to be a certain way, then they're also influencing that outcome. You can't just go outside and do something really wild like change the whole sky purple, because then that'll conflict with other people's ideas and expectations, and is kind of universal laws and things like that, like they kind of stop that from happening, so you don't impact other people's experience as well. However, for the time being, when not everyone's kind of awake to such concepts and expecting and allowing such dramatic scene changes or what have you to occur, kind of practicing such methods or trying to tap into such methods in your own sort of like private space is a lot easier to do, where you're the only one kind of creating that reality. Really kind of getting used to the idea and opening and flexing up like your mind and nervous system to kind of accept and understand and expect such like circumstances and scene changes to occur, rather than trying to just follow that real like linear 3D logical sort of path that we're so used to following along. The more you kind of ground such understanding and information within yourself, and really calm your own nervous system and mind and what have you to accepting and believing such things, the more easier it is for things to become more fluid like that, without it kind of overworking your own system and putting those blocks in place that kind of stop it from occurring. When the more that we eventually kind of open and expand our minds and abilities and such in this way, the more we collectively do that, and then the greater collective of people being able to do that, the more our whole like reality and such can be generated and tapped into in so many more ways in these instances, which is really cool and exciting. And it's also another reason why things throughout history and stuff and what have you, like media and education and like the news channel, or whether it's media like different movies or all that sort of stuff and information that we're like digesting, has kind of so often been used as a way to kind of swing and sway the collective mindset of humanity for the sort of reality we are like generating and projecting, you know, kind of like programming our subconscious mind and things like that in those sort of ways, with different, you know, themes for different, you know, motives or what have you. You know, like some groups have, you know, done it for more nefarious reasons to kind of have, you know, more negative outcomes like generated, or more chaotic outcomes and stuff and what have you generated. And then others have, you know, been trying to, you know, do it in a more kind of like positive, balanced way to have more, you know, effective and harmonious and sort of sovereign outcomes generated for humanity. You know, which is why it can be really important as well, kind of just being mindful of the sort of things you are ingesting in that sort of aspect, and what you are kind of taking on and receiving, and, you know, bringing in into yourself to then be, you know, generated as this collective field of reality. And, you know, on another like token as well, you know, so often the aspect of things like free will and stuff like that have, you know, been such a big universal law in this realm, in the aspect of, you know, people having the free will to, you know, believe what they want to believe, and, you know, generate what they want to generate and such, you know, which is, you know, those sort of forms of media and stuff has kind of been like a kind of tricky way to counter, like circumvent that sort of free will aspect. And then why, you know, with this day and age and stuff that we're moving forward into, it can be easier for people and stuff that are able to tap into certain abilities and stuff and what have you, like release video or footage of it or what have you, you know, rather than just doing it in the broad daylight in the middle of like the public town square or what have you. But being able to, you know, record footage and things like that and release it, because now we have things like AI and what have you, so people can also just put it in a category of, oh, that's just fake because that's just AI generated or something like that. You know, and some footage would be and will be, of course, AI generated, but some of it won't be. But that then puts that little free will aspect back in there, where people have that choice to believe what they want to believe, rather than it being like, you know, implanted into their reality by force. So yeah, just a little food for thought in that aspect too. All right, might leave this one here for now. Sending you so much peace, love, light, and blessings as always. Bye.